And joining us live in studio is Kim Heller, political analyst and commentator. Lindsay Marstorp is with the Black First, the Land First as the national spokesperson. Thank you so much for your time and good evening to you. Of course, a lot is at stake, but it seems that we've been fixated on whether the discussion around President Jacob Zuma being recalled or not is the end-all and be-all of what this conference is all about. Kim, in your view, why the obsession of whether Zuma would be recalled or not?
Thank you, Cindy. I think the obsession exists in the halls of money markets and mainstream media. And I think for those of us who believed even for a moment that recall would be on the agenda tonight, I think was for a moment caught in the false narrative that that is being spun by the mainstream media and which fell decisively today. And what we saw today was that the agenda of today was shaped, as it should be, by the ANC branches, as will the agenda of tomorrow for the ANC be shaped by its own people, and that will be the branches itself. And I think what we saw today, which I was quite encouraged by, was a very confident stance by the new SG of the ANC. He came out with a swag of a leader in control. And I'm hoping that what we see is a stronger communication effort from the ANC, a more decisive, focused stance, which has not always been the case, especially of recent times.
Yeah. Is it too soon, though, Lindsay, to talk about the renewal of the ANC, as we heard Cyril Ramaphosa saying that it would require the country's renewal? We need a paradigm shift, a new world order, if you will, for us to be able to achieve the social development needs that we have.
There can be no renewal of the ANC under Cyril Ramaphosa, or of the country under Cyril Ramaphosa for that matter. We remember the January 8th statement last year when President Jacob Zuma spoke about unity, and he went on to speak about the land returning to the black majority. He also touched on education, free education at that time. What we now see is the implementation of the policy position of the ANC, land expropriation without compensation, as well as free education that is being implemented now within the national politics of this country. But so we must ask a question, why is it that the conversation maintains itself that President Jacob Zuma must be removed? Well, it's quite simple. Since President Zuma broke rank with the ANC's ideology, maintaining white people in power and defending white monopoly capital, they've come, Rupert and his people like Cyril Ramaphosa have come out strong in wanting to remove President Jacob Zuma because he represents the interests of the people. That notions will maintain itself within the country and within the discourse of the politics of this country until he is removed, because he represents free education, represents the landless majority, and he represents a country that wants the mines and the land back in the majority hands.
Yeah, but with the build-up of the National Elective Conference, we were told that the runners and the two strong candidates were representing the policy of the ANC, which was radical economic transformation, and that it's not really based on personalities. Kim, did you concur that perhaps under Cyril Ramaphosa it's not guaranteed necessarily that this all radical approach to transformation will be implemented?
Well, the policies of the ANC should be strong enough to ensure that RET is implemented fully. And I think I've said before that the NEC and the President are actually just servants of ANC policy, and they must adhere to that. I think what we saw in December was a clarion call for a strong acceleration of the RET program. So the new president and his team collectively will need to ensure that, because he's accountable to the branch member of the ANC. And when we speak renewal, it's not about, I find the singular call to remove the president quite unimaginative and misleading. Renewal will require a complete new paradigm, I think, as Lindsay's saying. And we need to address, as we see the State of Capture report today coming out from the Public Protector's Office, we need to disengage completely and untangle the historic roots of this country by extending any probe that we do into the historical crimes of great corruption and economic crimes that we saw then. Because to date, economic transformation, economic liberation has been in a state of capture in the Rainbow Nation. So a new paradigm that brings about a renewal of the ANC will require a totally different level of thinking. And just on that point, I think the one thing that concerned me at the policy conference was that land return without compensation was a policy decision. And of course, any patriotic person in this country would want that. But there was no timetable around that. So I'm hoping that we see on Saturday from the President very clear timelines about that, because this cannot be a 30-year process. It has to be the year of land return without expropriation this year, 2018.
And do you think that outweighs the need for the recall of President Jacob Zuma from certain quarters, including whether the ANC would be able to recover the lost voter support, as we've seen in the local government elections, those that wanted for Zuma to be recalled?
I mean, we must firstly accept that there can be no unity between those who defend white monopoly capital and those who want black people to enjoy the land that was stolen from us. There can never be unity. Then we must also understand that Cyril Ramaphosa represents Lonman. He represents white land thieves who have stolen our land. He represents those people who want to maintain us as slaves. He represents the embodiment of the ANC, who has historically been the defender of white monopoly capital. When Jacob Zuma, President Jacob Zuma, broke rank with that position and began to represent the interests of the black majority, he then became an enemy of white monopoly capital. We must understand that the ANC, in a liberal framework, will maintain this discourse, ongoing discourse of is it possible, can we return it or can't we? Whereas Jacob Zuma, President Jacob Zuma, represents someone who says we are going to implement free education no matter what white commission says. And if we take the position of free education historically, knowing that it's been also a policy of the ANC historically, unable to be implemented, we then understand there is a leader in President Jacob Zuma who can implement the will of the people. So here's a categoric moment here with the January 8th address that's coming this week. Will President of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, come out clearly and represent the interests of the black majority, or will he continue to represent Lonman, continue to represent land thieves and those who want to maintain us as landless?
Yeah, but isn't that maybe the interesting dynamic, that he does have the interest and influence with business, and that the persuasion could probably be a little bit more sweeter from Cyril Ramaphosa to engage business in doing what is required around land, education, etc. Lindsay, you don't...
Johan Rupert pays slave wages to his workers. Black people are dying when they are mourning on farms today. I don't understand this theory that white people are somehow going to wake up one morning and have a good interest in their hearts and have black people's interest. If in '94 they really believed in the Rainbow Nation project under their best president, Nelson Mandela, they would have then ensured that the land is shared by black and white people. They have no interest in us. They kill our people in Lonman. They kill our people on the farms. White people don't want black people to exist as human beings. They want to kill us, and when we mourn the death of those,
and you're generalizing.
I mean,
we're talking about whites in the context of the monopoly, and not general, Joe Soap or ordinary people.
Joe Soap is the person who was at the farm with the security company who killed a farm worker. Joe Soap is the one in our institutions who was telling us that we can't have free education. Joe Soap is the one that runs Lonman. We must not think that there are good white people that have our interests set out. White people, historically, from Joe Slover to Hanekom, hate the existence of black lives. We must make peace with that. And we must liberate this country by thinking black first.
I don't necessarily agree, Kim, and maybe help us here that in the interest of creating the social cohesion, the egalitarian society, the promises of the Freedom Charter, and what we subscribe to as a constitution, that it is absolutely imperative that we deal with injustice, inequality, redress, the exclusion of the past. We still have to do so in a manner that will not take away the gains of our liberation since democracy.
Well, I think when we say what liberation has been, what is on offer at the moment, this is not true liberation. And I agree actually with everything that Lindsay said. I don't think white people in this country have shown any appetite for true liberation. They haven't contributed anything. In fact, we have had the artificially sweetened paradigm of the Rainbow Nation. And effectively, it's time to shut down that Rainbow Nation and put black people first. And I think Lindsay's correct. The president of the ANC and the ANC collectively must decide what their focus is now. And it is to put the black child first, restoring the dignity of the black child, which has been taken away brutally by white people in this country. And if Ramaphosa, with his good relations in business, is to be an asset, he needs to persuade white business to commit wholeheartedly to real economic liberation, rather than just provide crumbs, which I think at times I think that black South Africans have become accustomed to and settled for, and that will never free us. So I completely agree with that, and the focus needs to be on giving great impetus to the resolutions that were taken at the ANC conference in December. And he must, as the rest of the ANC, be held accountable for those decisions.
Yeah, give us the building blocks, or maybe in a sense, I know there's no silver bullet, but in the land expropriation issue, which has been very contentious and could potentially, if not managed properly, lead to even more bloodshed. In that, what are the building blocks that need to happen? We've had the land was it the audit? There's been many other studies done, and you'll hear every forum saying that the majority of black people wouldn't know what to do with the land and, would rather have the money anyway. So all of that, just give us a sense of what is step one in dealing with this issue of land expropriation.
In the context of the NEC and the upcoming January 8th statement, Cyril Ramaphosa must make a decision and come out clear and say land must be returned to black majority. That's the first thing he must do. He must isolate people like Bram Honeycomb, as well as all those agents of white monopoly capital. The second thing that must be done is it must be implemented through Parliament, of course. Simultaneously, black first land force will continue to take land on the ground. Why? Because there's no political will in this country. All these politicians simply want to eat from Rupert's table, like Cyril Ramaphosa. We can't negotiate with people who want to eat. We can't. How do we expect Cyril Ramaphosa to sit down with white business and negotiate when the miners were killed called upon with concomitant action by Cyril Ramaphosa? It is up to us as black people to honor Biko's dying wish to unite and to take the land back so we can have the egalitarian society. There's no egalitarian society in this constitutional democracy that means white people have life and black people enjoy death. I'm with President Zuma, who is a constitutional delinquent and who says land must be returned to the black majority.
But that is another process as well, because we know there had to be a policy reform. Zuma did speak about that with the January 8th statement last year, that it needs to be within the confines of the law and the Constitution.
But that worries me, because land return without expropriation needs to be an action plan for this year, as I've said before. And I think there should be no constraints. So the ANC needs to make that happen. It's quite interesting that people say that President Zuma is a problem going into the election. I don't agree. I think the issue of a lack of real transformation in this country, the lack of economic transformation, landlessness, those are things that are contributing to the ANC's vulnerability, and they need to deal with that head on. And issues like free education, I'm actually appalled that white business is questioning the validity of this investment. The duty of a president of the ANC, and let us hope that, well, in fact, we must insist that Ramaphosa does that, is that he must ensure that free education is seen as a priceless investment, and business needs to come along. They have never shown a moral compass. They must do that. Whether we can ever expect that from the white community in this country is something I'm not certain of at all, though.
Do you think we were piercing that false veneer that if you invest in the black child, it will destabilize the economy? We're already spending so much on social grants. There's free housing, free this, that it should be adequate. The township schools are being improved. The mud schools are also getting a little bit of attention. That if we were to say we want to empower the black person to be able to fend for themselves, be analytical in their thinking, pursue whatever career that they want, that it is wasteful expenditure. Lindsay, why do we still have that kind of?
I mean,
experts know how.
This is the logic of white people, of white ways of thinking of racism in itself, that black people need to be rescued. That the problem is not white people and the fact that they have looted and stole our economy and our land. The problem is black people who need to simply breathe. That's the problem through the white lens. We must disrupt that thinking totally and understand that there's no problem with black people. We're fine. But we're not fine with being dead. We want to gain life. And how are we going to do that? Take the economy, take the land practically. We must go to Rupert's Farm and take his farm.
Who's going to do the laundry? I mean, everybody has got a junior degree. No, I know I'm being facetious. But let's okay, the NEC has to sit now and make very tough decisions, implement and be seen to be doing something, because they do not have the luxury of time to muck around it anymore. Kim, in your sense, do you see the structure, the composition, especially of the working committee, will find that out, that they now have that kind of sense of urgency? To really get down to the
They must move decisively. and they must move quickly. And I've been extremely critical of my analysis of the ANC, that they have been very timid in terms of white interests. And the centrality that they give to white people and white business and white decision makers is appalling. And it lends itself to this kind of thinking. You know, just coming back to a point that you and Lindsay were discussing now about this, we mustn't disrupt the economy. We're treating this economy as if it's not a disrupted economy. We're not looking at the daily violence of the structural violence inherent in that system to maintain it. So yes, of course, we must disrupt that economy. And I don't think we should put any terms and conditions on land return without expropriation. This country can never be free until that happens. And we cannot speak about economic renewal. We cannot speak about the renewal of the ANC until they do that. And they must do it this year.
Yeah, but there's a little detail in the Constitution that you can't just take back, even if it were stolen land, without compensation. Lindsay, so...
I mean, the Constitution is inherently anti-black. That's why we agree with President Zuma, who they call constitutional delinquents. But I also want us to remember something. In 2015, when the Fees Must Fall movement or this thing was happening, we were vilified for breaking into parliament, we were vilified for burning things, all these things. Today you see the profits of struggle. Yet we cannot even imagine that the practical profits of legislating land return is going to be gained through practically taking it back. I don't know if we have this. I think we have the tendency just to be short-sighted and forget that struggle is not won in parliament. Struggle is won on the ground by making a reality, a lived reality for black people that is different. So, unfortunately, we can expect nothing from Cyril Ramaphosa. The ANC will maintain itself as the bodyguard of white monopoly capital, and the only way to bring about change is black people must unite, go to Rupert's Farm, the ones we've been interdicted from SBLF, and take back that land.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot has been done as well. I mean, that the ANC can pat itself on the back for, in the sense that the policies of the Competition Commission, and I mean, there's a lot that has been uncovered. There has been at least attempts being made to broaden even the whole issue around corruption and take it into the public discourse for us, not only to debate, but to have a different perspective on it. Would you say that these would count at least in the favor of the ANC now, or is it a case of a clean slate for the new National Executive Committee going forward?
Well, I think we need to be fair to the ANC and its policies of the economy and emancipation have certainly lifted people out of great poverty and have changed the lives of millions of people. It just hasn't been done at a pace that is fast enough. And there may be a need now to review some of the policies that perhaps aren't as resonant now as they were 23 years ago. And that may include the Freedom Charter, which has a provision about land belonging to all when part of that land was stolen by white people. So I think there's a time for renewal of policies and revolutionization of some of the policies to make them as tangible and resonant to the the current conditions as possible.
Let me paraphrase that question and say, in that, can the ANC still gloat about being the true leader of society?
There's nothing that the ANC can gloat about. The ANC is a bodyguard of white monopoly capital. Under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma, they went off that track and became the expression of the black majority. They have now decided they want a president of white monopoly capital. There's nothing that they can gloat about. It is the work and the actions of ordinary black people on the streets, those from the ANC and those outside the ANC, that have defended and pushed the gains that we can make revolution. Revolution does not stop. We are not interested in those 4 square meter houses, these small hawkies. We are not interested only in free education for the poor. We don't want to study in a racist Stellenbosch institution. We want an institution that speaks to the black logic and a decolonial framework. We want to live in houses that are in Camps Bay. And we're not going to settle for less than because the ANC has done some miraculous thing in 23 years. They remain a bodyguard of WMC, white monopoly capital, until they decide to stand with the black majority. We will continue to tell them the truth.
But the political bourgeoisie is a construct of the ANC policies through BEE and you know, whatever other transactions, which in itself is not a bad thing. But I suppose when it stops serving the interests of the majority, then it becomes problematic. But Kim, other issues that they need to discuss, of course, is the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, was brought up. We know that Advocate Mkhwebane was vilified and ridiculed that she didn't understand the law or her limitations when she asked for the expansion of its mandate. And of course, there's the radical economic transformation that they need to break down for us to be able to comprehend fully.
And that's, I think, why we need clear deliverables and timetabling around all those issues, all of which is what I believe that the ANC branch has voted for, rather than a leader who was, a president. I think that the resounding voice was for an accelerated plan. And the ANC will need to understand its main constituency and stop marching, as it has been, to the master script of white interests. And the time, if they don't do that now, I think the longevity of the party is placed under threat in 2019.
Yeah, so which would be very critical in who is deployed as well into state-owned entities and wherever other government levers can be used to improve the lives of ordinary citizens.
That's very true. But there's something that we must understand about the ANC. You know, as Black First, Land First, for the longest time now, we've defended the President Jacob Zuma, we've defended RET, and we do this on a condition that that President Zuma represents the interests of the people as well as RET, as well as how they position critical and key leaders like Brian Molefe, for example, at ESCOM and so forth, in the interest of the people. Our defense of the president, our defense of the programs of RET is on condition that it represents the people. The ANC must not make a mistake to think that we're just in love with the ANC. We love the people of this country, the black majority. And if the ANC does not side with the black majority and decides to continue to side with white monopoly capital and give our SOEs over to white monopoly capital, as they've done, unfortunately, they will be at loggerheads with a movement that represents the black majority of this country.
And Kim, I mean, the dynamics also of the new team, they have to almost juggle quite a bit in terms of their stance and their approach to things. We know that there are those who would want to take a more pragmatic or a slower approach to how things are implemented, and those who want to be more radical. In your view, do you think that there would be that unity or unified voice of what the way forward is going to be?
Well, I think the allure and facade of unity is not enough, and I think unity of purpose is going to have to merge around principled unity on real issues that affect the ground. And it is of concern to me, as I've expressed before, that there's very few young people in the leadership structures of the ANC, and I don't think that bodes well for 2019. And they need, as a matter of urgency, to understand the real issues in the youth of South Africa, which is landlessness, which is poverty, which is free education. And I'm not sure that this aged, middle-aged, sagged leadership is going to do that. So they're going to need a lot of help from the youth, and they must humble themselves in that respect.
And hold off on that ageism. I mean, they have their
I'm
uses,
guilty of
don't
it,
they?
yes.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thanks indeed for your time. We're speaking to Kim Heller, political analyst, a commentator and a writer, and Lindsay Marsdorp is the Black First, the Land First, the national spokesperson. You're at home. Thanks for staying with us, and we're back after the short break.